Everybody. So we're just kind of recapping what we did this past week, and we talked about how do we know if Jesus really came back to life, right? This is the week after Easter. Easter, we celebrate the fact that Jesus came back to life, but how do we know that that's really true? There's a lot riding on that question, right? If Jesus didn't come back to life, there's no reason for any of this church stuff to be happening. There's no reason for us to talk about it. There's no reason for us to ask if we should live our lives any differently because of what Jesus did, because it doesn't matter if he didn't come back to life, right? Then it was all a big story. It was a big fake. But if Jesus came back to life, that means something amazing. That means that he is the Son of God, and he actually came down and did what he said he was going to do. He came back to life, and that his words gotta carry a lot more weight, being that he is God in the flesh here on earth, having spoken with us, right? Like, there's a big difference. So we're going to take a look at this because it's a super serious thing. But first of all, before we even get into if he really came back to life or not, we want to look at who Jesus said he was, right? Because again, like, he could just be a guy who came back to life. Maybe something weird happened. Maybe he wasn't really dead, right? And then we still, like, what do we do with this guy that came back to life? Maybe, right? But Jesus was pretty clear about who he was while he was alive, right? There's no like, oh, he was just a nice, happy guy. He was a nice teacher. He wanted people to be good to other people. Like, Jesus was very outspoken about who he really was. So there are three different ways we can know who Jesus really was. One was by witnesses, right? People who followed Jesus around saw a bunch of things, and they told other people about them. That's how word spread. That's how giant groups of people came to see who Jesus was, first of all, right? Like, Jesus commanded giant crowds wherever he went. People would come to hear him speak. Why would they do that? There must have been something about him, right? And it probably wasn't just that he was a really good speaker. There was something else going on. But the first thing is, we'll read this in Luke. It's a gospel, one of the first 4 books in the New Testament. Luke writes this account that he got from other people in chapter 3, verse 22. He said, "Then one day, after the crowds had been baptized, Jesus himself was baptized." Jesus went to this guy named John to get baptized, to kind of begin his public ministry, because this guy John was talking about how God was going to bring the Messiah, his chosen one, to the world to make the world better. And John was like getting people ready for Jesus's ministry. So Jesus went to John and got baptized there to be with those people and to kind of be like, guess what? This is it. It's starting. And this is what happened. After Jesus was baptized and he was praying afterwards, right? The heavens opened up. And the Holy Spirit came in the form of a dove and settled upon him. And a voice from heaven said, "You are my much loved son. Yes, my delight." This isn't just like a story written by a guy in the Bible, right? This guy, Luke, was actually a really smart guy. He was a physician, a doctor, but back then it was a little different than it is now, right? But he knew how to read and write, and that wasn't something that everybody knew how to do back then. And this guy was actually kind of commissioned by a guy in Rome to go figure out what Jesus was about, right? Like, Luke went and followed around the disciples, the people who followed Jesus. He followed around Paul. He wrote the whole book of Acts as well. And Luke was kind of like a reporter of the day, right? Like, he went around and interviewed everybody in Jerusalem and kind of saw what heard what all the stories were, and he put the stories that seemed to make sense that everyone agreed on, he put those together into an account of Jesus's life. So Luke is kind of like a reporter that reports on Jesus's life a bit after the fact. I mean, he was right there, living in the same time period, but Luke wasn't one of the disciples that followed Jesus around everywhere, but at the same time, Luke believed in Jesus, and he took the reports and put them together of everybody who saw all this stuff happen. So everyone sees this happen. Luke is saying this isn't just a story. Luke is saying that everyone sees the heavens open up. They see this dove come and rest on Jesus while he's praying after he was baptized, and they hear this voice. He's saying other people heard this. This wasn't just like a thing. This wasn't what Jesus told people happened. Like, other people saw this. This is from witness evidence that they saw this happen. So there's something different about this Jesus guy, right? The other way we can know, second way, is miracles. Jesus did miracles, right? That's why all those giant crowds came to see him. They didn't come to see him because he was a really good speaker. Like, a lot of people maybe would have came if he was just a really good speaker, but people came because he did amazing miracles. He healed people, right? In John chapter 11, there's this guy that Jesus was friends with named Lazarus, and he was really sick. And his sisters sent word to Jesus. Jesus was like a couple towns away, like a few days walk away. And they were like, hey, Lazarus is really sick. Will you come? Because we know that you can heal him. So would you please come and heal him so he doesn't die? Like, this is pretty serious. And Jesus kind of hangs out and waits and doesn't go right away. And then he gets word that Lazarus is dead. Right, and this is what happens. It says, when Jesus arrived there, he was told that Lazarus had already been in his grave for 4 days. So Jesus waited and didn't go see him. And Lazarus was dead. He had been dead for 4 days by the time Jesus got to the place where Lazarus was, and his sisters were asking for help. And then Jesus shouted, Lazarus, come out, right? Lazarus's sisters are there upset at Jesus. They're like, if you would have came earlier, he'd still be alive. Like, it's your fault. Like, we know you could heal him, and you didn't come. Why didn't you come when we asked you? And Jesus was sad. And then he goes and he shouts, come out to Lazarus. And a dead man came out, right? Lazarus came out of the grave, the tomb that he was in, right? It wasn't like a hole in the ground and he came up like a zombie. No, they had like caves that they put people in, kind of like mausoleums nowadays, if you've ever seen one of those. And he just comes walking out of it, right? All of these people saw Lazarus dead. They knew he was dead. He had been dead for 4 days. There was no doubt in anyone's mind that this man was dead. And Jesus just says, Lazarus, come out. And the guy walks out. Are you kidding? Right? Like, people saw this. And it says in John chapter 11, John, one of the disciples that followed Jesus around, he said, many of the people who were with Mary believed in Jesus when they saw this, right? There are people there who are like, yeah, that Jesus guy, whatever. You guys are friends with him. That's good. But they saw Lazarus come back to life and they're like, this guy is for real. Like, this is something. We should start listening to him. And they believed in Jesus. They believed that Jesus was who he said he was. One more miracle. A vast crowd. In Matthew chapter 15, verse 30, it says this. A vast crowd brought to him people who were lame, blind, crippled, those who couldn't speak, and many others. They laid them before Jesus, and he healed them all. All right, Matthew wrote this. This isn't like a specific account, but there are a lot of people who Jesus healed over the time. All right, and the last thing, the third way we can know who Jesus is with his own words, right? Like, he didn't mince words. He told people who he was. So this is after Jesus was arrested and was getting ready to be crucified, right? Like, this is his trial before he gets crucified in front of the Jewish leaders, the people who hated him, who wanted him killed. This is found in Mark chapter 14, verse 61 through 64. Then the high priest asked Jesus, are you the Messiah, the Son of God? And Jesus said, I am. Enough right there, right? He said, are you the Messiah, the Son of God? Jesus says, yes, I am. Nothing else, right? And he said, and you will see me sitting at the right hand of God and returning to earth in the clouds of heaven, right? Jesus doesn't like mince words here, right? He says, I am the Son of God. Bam. And you're going to see me coming back to heaven. I'm going to sit at the right hand of God, meaning God has given me power to do things, right? And at this, the high priest gets super mad, and they're like, that's it. We know it. We have to kill this guy. This guy is crazy, and he thinks he's the Son of God. And there's no way he's the Son of God. It's blasphemy, and he deserves to die for it, right? And they voted unanimously to kill Jesus. And that's when they go take him to the Roman governor and try and get him killed that way. And they end up succeeding. But, right, Jesus says, I am the Son of God. There's nothing else about it. He says it very plainly, very openly. If he was lying, he would have had a chance to save his life right there, right? Like, if he wasn't the Son of God and he was just making all this stuff up and stuff was like happening some other way, he could have been like, actually, you know what? You got me. Fine. Don't kill me, right? Like, he could have backed out, but he didn't because he really believed and knew that he was the Son of God. So what are we going to do with that? We're going to talk about that next time. We're going to do a few series of videos because there's a lot of stuff to talk about here. So what are we going to do with Jesus? We see through witnesses, through his miracles, and through his own words that he says he's the Son of God, come down to earth to save all of humanity. What does that mean? So we're going to check that out a little bit more with the next video.